The wind moved like a whispered warning through the vast, lonely timberline of Idaho, where the pine trees grew taller than ambition and the sky at night felt close enough to touch. Dr. Claire Vega had never believed in magic, but she did believe in moments. The kind of moments that made a person stop breathing, if only for the hope that the world might surprise them again. It had been a long time since Claire had felt that hope. But as she trudged through the thinning forest with her boots crusted in mud and her old camera slung around her neck, something in the air tonight prickled at her skin. She was here on behalf of the Silver Pine Conservancy, under the premise of assessing the health of the Ghost Timberline's wildlife. But her real reason was more complicated. Once, she had chased glory with her lens, filming lions in Africa, snow leopards in Mongolia, orcas off the Chilean coast. These days, she wanted quieter things, peace maybe, or at least proof that beauty still existed in places untouched by human hands. Her divorce papers were finalized last spring. The ink had barely dried on her name. Idaho had called to her not as a fresh start, but as a hiding place. The moon was sharp and high above, blanketing the forest with a ghostly light. Her breath formed little clouds, and every step echoed with the crunch of frostbitten leaves. She should have felt alone. Instead, she felt watched, not by people, but by the land itself. Claire stopped as her radio crackled with static, then silence. She flicked it off, tired of updates from her foundation team who sat miles away in warm, sterile offices, tracking her GPS pings and waiting for progress reports. Tonight, progress could wait. Something had pulled her off trail, deeper than she had planned to go. It wasn't logic guiding her feet, but intuition. That ancient voice that lives in the bones and only speaks when the world is quiet enough to listen. Ahead, the trees thinned and the forest floor dipped into a shallow hollow. She crouched low, moving slow. Something was wrong. Or rather, something was right. So right, it didn't belong to her. There, under the moon's silver eye, a scene unfolded that would stay with Claire Vega for the rest of her life. In the clearing, animals gathered in silence, frozen as if by an unspoken pact. A pair of foxes, sleek and fiery, stood nose to tail. A great horned owl perched on a low branch, its gold eyes unblinking. An elk, regal and massive, stood beside a family of nervous deer. Even a bobcat slunk between tufts of grass, its attention rapt but unthreatening. Predator and prey, together, not in a fragile truce, but in perfect, breathless awe. At the center of the hollow, a silver mare labored in the pale grass. Her sides quivered, muscles tense. Claire's pulse hammered in her ears as she realized what she was seeing. Birth. The mare's head arched toward the sky, lips parted in silent effort, as the world seemed to wait for her. The animals didn't move. Not a single branch snapped, not a single bird called. A dapple gray foal slipped into the world, the birth clean and swift. The foal's coat shimmered with an impossible iridescence, almost as if it glowed with the light of the moon itself. Claire felt a jolt run up her spine. The foal stood on shaky legs within seconds, as if gravity was just a suggestion. Its eyes were enormous and unafraid. Claire wanted to move. She wanted to breathe. Instead, she lifted her camera in slow motion, afraid that any sudden movement would shatter the spell. She tried to steady her hands, to focus on the miracle. Her entire career had led her to moments like this, hadn't it? To document the impossible, to show the world the sacredness that still lingered at the edges of wilderness. She zoomed in, framing the silver mare and her newborn foal in the gentle light. The shot was perfect, the kind that wins awards and grants, the kind that reminds people why wild things matter. She started to press record. And then a new sound cut through the hollow, a mechanical hum, thin but growing louder, spinning down from above. Claire's heart dropped. She looked up and saw the blinking red light of a drone, not hers, someone else's, someone careless or curious or cruel. The spell broke. The animals shivered with a collective tension, and then, like a dam giving way, panic exploded. Foxes darted for cover, Deer bounded away in desperate leaps, the owl launched into flight, the elk thundered into the trees. Even the bobcat vanished. The silver mare stood, nostrils flaring, her body shielding the foal. But the foal, strange and beautiful and brand new, did not flee. Instead, it turned its head, searching the clearing, and for one long electric moment its eyes met Claire's. The look was steady, curious, as if it recognized her from a dream. A branch snapped behind her. Claire jerked around. A man in hunter's camouflage stepped from the shadows, his boots silent but his presence jarring. He carried a high-powered rifle, the kind used to track cougars rumored to be preying on local livestock. His face was set and grim. He saw the mare, saw the foal, saw the opportunity. Without thinking, Claire moved between him and the clearing. "Don't shoot!" she whispered fiercely. The hunter's eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice harsh, slicing through the lingering magic. He leveled the rifle. "You're trespassing, lady." Claire swallowed, trying to keep her fear hidden. "There's nothing here. You saw nothing," she lied, heart pounding so loud she could barely think. "Just a deer trail. Move on." He hesitated. His finger tightened on the trigger, then loosened. After a long, dangerous pause, he glared and lowered his rifle. "You conservationists are all the same," he muttered, retreating into the darkness. Claire's hands shook. The camera was still running, but the spell was gone. She stared at the footage for a moment, animals in awe, a silver mare, a glowing foal, and then, with trembling fingers, deleted it. No record, no proof, only memory. She looked back to the hollow. The foal was still watching her, calm as moonlight. The mare stepped closer to her baby, the night settling again. Claire left the path and walked toward them, not as a scientist, not as a filmmaker, but as someone who had been chosen, if only for a moment, to witness something sacred. The night deepened around her, and in that hollow, under the indigo Idaho sky, Claire Vega knew that her life had just changed forever. Claire barely slept that night, and when she did, her dreams flickered with visions of moonlit eyes and a dappled foal shining against the darkness. By dawn, the images had burned themselves into her mind so fiercely that for a moment, she doubted whether it had happened at all. But the tremble in her hands, the smell of pine sap still clinging to her jacket, and the feeling of awe and fear tangled inside her, those were too real to be dreamed. She didn't report what she'd seen, not in her field notes, not to the foundation. She couldn't. She woke up early, long before the rest of the world, and found herself retracing her steps, drawn by a gravity she didn't understand. There was no logical reason to go back. If anything, her job required her to keep moving, to catalog, to move on. But logic had nothing to do with what she felt now. She carried her camera, out of habit, the way a musician carries an old guitar, more as a part of herself than a tool. Each step back into the woods felt heavier, as if she were trespassing on sacred ground. The Idaho morning was crisp and clear, frost sparkled on the low grass, and a red-tailed hawk circled high above, its cry echoing through the empty silence. At the edge of the hollow, Claire paused. She crouched low, heart pounding, scanning the clearing. She half expected to find it empty, as if the night before had been a hallucination, brought on by exhaustion and loneliness. But there they were, the silver mare, her dappled foal, and a handful of other animals returning, warily, as if the world had resumed its ordinary rhythm. The foal was nursing, its body already steadier, its legs stronger. The mare glanced up at Claire, recognition, or perhaps warning, in her dark eyes. Claire raised her camera out of instinct, zooming in on the foal. The lens trembled slightly in her grasp. She could document this. She could capture the way the foal moved, the shimmer in its coat, the impossible way predator and prey stood so close without fear. This would change everything, her career, the Conservancy's funding, even the way people saw wild places. She could already imagine the headlines, miracle birth in Idaho wilderness, new species discovered. She could see herself on stage at conferences, the footage looping behind her, a reminder of the moment she didn't flinch. But she didn't press record. Somewhere deep inside, Something stopped her cold. She remembered the panic the drone had caused, how it shattered the spell. She remembered the hunter, his eyes, his rifle, his disbelief, and the way she'd lied, a lie so instinctive it felt true. What was she doing? Was her job to reveal or to protect? If she captured this, would it be for science or for herself? Was this a story that belonged to her or to the hollow, to the animals, to something older and wilder than any human ambition? She lowered her camera, and for the first time in her life as a filmmaker, she made a choice not to capture the most important thing she'd ever seen. A twig snapped behind her. Claire spun around, breath catching in her throat. The hunter was back. This time, he didn't bother to hide his approach. He stepped into the clearing with a kind of careless confidence, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his boots scuffing the soft earth. "Thought I might find you here," he said. His voice was low, gruff, not unfriendly, but not trusting either. Most people would have run off after last night. Claire squared her shoulders, willing herself not to show fear. "I'm just observing. You're supposed to be tracking cougars, not harassing." She gestured, not wanting to be too specific. "The herd." He gave her a look, part suspicion and part grudging respect. "Whatever was here last night, it was special. I've seen elk give birth, and deer, but that—" He shook his head, almost reverent, then caught himself. "Doesn't matter. Rules are rules. There's livestock at risk. I have to report anything unusual." She stepped between him and the clearing, just as before, adrenaline surging. "There's nothing here, nothing you'd understand. Let it go." He glared, jaw clenching. "You're not in charge out here. I could have you removed, you know." Claire didn't back down. "You saw nothing. You want to protect your job? Fine. But you didn't see anything last night." They stood, two strangers bound by something unspoken. The forest seemed to hush, waiting for one of them to break. Finally, the hunter spat on the ground, muttered something under his breath, and turned away. But before he vanished, he looked over his shoulder. "You're playing a dangerous game, Doc. Nature's not as gentle as you think." Claire watched him go, her body still trembling, her mind racing. He wasn't wrong. She'd made herself part of the story now, whether she liked it or not. And she had chosen a side. As the day wore on, Claire circled the hollow, careful to stay out of sight. The animals had returned, though wary, as if trusting her presence for now. She jotted notes in a battered journal, descriptions of the foal's coat, sketches of the mare's unique markings, the way the other animals responded to the pair. But when it came time to write about the birth, about the silence and the miracle, her pen hesitated. How could she explain what she'd seen without ruining it? How could she share the truth without inviting danger? She looked at the camera hanging from her neck and made a decision. One by one, she deleted the footage from the night before, the animals gathered, the birth, the foal's impossible glow, erased as if it had never happened. The only evidence now was what she carried inside her, and the faint impressions left in the hollow. As dusk approached, Claire ventured closer to the mare and foal. The mare's sides rose and fell in slow, deep breaths. The foal, curious and unafraid, took a few tentative steps toward her. Claire held perfectly still, hands open, heart pounding in her chest. The foal sniffed the air, then, in a moment so gentle it nearly broke her, reached out and brushed its soft muzzle against her hand. The world seemed to pause. The line between wild and human blurred, and for that instant, Claire felt she belonged. Night descended once more. Claire set up a small camp just beyond the hollow, careful not to intrude, but close enough to watch. She cooked a meager meal over a portable stove, all the while listening for movement in the brush. In the distance, an owl called, and coyotes sang to the moon. She scribbled notes in her journal. Saw the foal heal? No, just comfort a limping fawn. Coincidence? Or something more? She wrote not for her team, not for the foundation, but for herself, for remembrance, for truth, and for the hollow that had changed her. As she drifted to sleep under the Idaho stars, Claire Vega knew her life would never be the same, and whatever came next, she would not, could not, look away. The following days blurred together in a hush of forest green and the constant pulse of hidden life. Claire Vega moved quietly through the timberline, no longer a scientist stalking data, but a witness swept into something ancient and wordless. There were rules here she was only just beginning to understand, rules of patience, presence, and respect. She woke at dawn, breath frosting before her lips, and packed only what was essential: a battered field notebook, pencils whittled down to nubs, a canteen, her camera, which she now left unused and zipped away, and enough food to last a few days. The outside world, emails, progress reports, expectations, became just background static, a distant radio she learned to tune out. Each morning Claire returned to the hollow by a different path, careful not to create a visible trail. The ground was often damp, soft with pine needles and moss, swallowing her footprints. She moved slowly, like prey, watching for warning flickers in the brush. Her pulse quickened every time she neared the clearing, afraid the animals might have vanished, afraid she'd shattered something delicate with her intrusion. But each time, she found the hollow alive, sometimes pulsing with stillness, sometimes quietly bustling with improbable harmony. The first morning, the silver mare grazed at the edge of the clearing, the foal nestled close to her flank. A pair of fox kits tumbled through the grass, stopping short when they saw Claire, then, sensing no threat, returning to their play. Overhead, a red-shouldered hawk spiraled, while a bobcat slipped along the shadows, eyes glinting. Claire chose a spot just beyond the ring of trees and sat with her notebook, trying to slow her own breathing, blending herself into the silence. She let the sounds of the wild wash over her: the creak of pine, the murmur of a distant stream, the odd hush that seemed to gather wherever the foal wandered. She watched for hours, waiting for the wild to reveal its secrets on its own terms. On the second day, she saw something that unsettled her in a new way. A limping fawn stumbled into the hollow, its hind leg dragging with each uncertain step. The other deer watched but didn't intervene. Claire tensed, half expecting the bobcat to pounce. Instead, the dapple-gray foal, shimmering softly even in daylight, approached the fawn. The foal nudged it gently with its muzzle, standing quietly until the fawn calmed. For a few minutes, the two stood together, their breaths visible in the cool air. The fawn's trembling eased. When it took its next step, the limp was gone. Claire's mouth went dry. She gripped her pencil, scribbling. Healing? Or just comfort? No explanation. Miraculous? The more she watched, the more impossible things she witnessed. A wounded hawk, its wing dragging at an odd angle, swooped low and landed by a puddle, not far from where a bobcat lay curled, eyes half closed. Claire held her breath, certain she'd see violence, but the hawk dipped its beak to drink. The bobcat watched but didn't attack. The peace was so absolute it felt sacred, like church. On another morning, the silver mare wandered further from the foal than before, her age showing in the stiffness of her gait. Claire noticed how the foal, even when it played or explored, always kept watch, alert and protective. When the mare finally lay down to rest, something she hadn't dared since the night of the birth, the foal stood over her, head raised, as if guarding a queen. It wasn't just the animals that changed. Claire felt it in herself, too. Her days slipped into a rhythm that belonged more to the wild than to her old human routines. She ate when she was hungry, slept when the sun fell, wrote by moonlight. Her notes filled with observations, not just data but impressions, sketches, poetry, questions she didn't know how to answer. The foal glows even at dusk. The air around it hums. What is it? Not a ghost, not a legend, but more alive than anything I've seen. Predator and prey together. No fear. What changed? Is it the foal or the place? I am here. I am here. Is that enough? Sometimes she worried she was losing perspective, falling into fantasy. But then she'd hear a branch snap and see the foal watching her, eyes bright and knowing. Or she'd catch her reflection in a puddle and realize she looked less like a scientist and more like a wild thing herself, hair tangled, cheeks wind-burned, eyes lit by something she couldn't name. At night, Claire made a small camp nearby, always just outside the hollow's boundary. She never built a fire, too risky, too intrusive, but wrapped herself in a thick blanket, listening to the sounds of animals sleeping nearby. On one chilly night, she heard the soft, rhythmic breathing of the mare and foal just beyond the brush. It calmed her, as if their presence offered a kind of safety she hadn't known she needed. Days passed. She saw the world slow down. She noticed how the deer grazed in a lazy circle, how the foxes dug for grubs, how even the smallest creatures seemed drawn to the clearing as if by an invisible force. She watched, listened, wrote, no longer for science, not for any grant or recognition, but for herself, for remembrance. She filled her notebooks with what she saw, knowing most would never believe her, but that didn't matter. One afternoon, the sky darkened suddenly, thunder rumbling far off, rain sheeting down. Claire scrambled for cover beneath a pine, clutching her notebook to her chest. She watched as the animals did the same. The mare and foal stood close together, unafraid, while the others sheltered nearby. The hollow became a sanctuary, rain pattering on fur and feathers, every creature united by the storm. The rain cleared, and sunlight broke through, dazzling. The foal shook itself, sending tiny droplets into the air like sparks. Claire laughed, quietly, feeling her heart open in a way she hadn't in years. By now, she knew she couldn't go back. Not really. She couldn't unsee what she'd witnessed, couldn't pretend she was just another biologist passing through. The hollow had changed her. It had taught her to wait, to watch, to listen, and more than anything, it had given her a new sense of belonging, to the land, to its mysteries, to herself. As dusk fell and the animals settled, Claire closed her notebook, lying back on the soft earth. She gazed up at the sky, deep blue fading to indigo, stars winking awake, and felt, for the first time in a long while, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The world outside the hollow never really left Claire alone, no matter how deeply she tried to lose herself in the wild. Each morning, her satellite phone blinked with messages from her foundation team, requests for data uploads, reminders about funding cycles, questions about the location, pings from her GPS tracker. Even in the deepest reaches of the ghost timberline, the outside world pressed against her, trying to claim a piece of what she had found. At first, Claire ignored the alerts, turning off her phone for hours at a time. She convinced herself it was enough just to postpone responding, to give herself another sunrise, another quiet evening in the hollow. But the pressure mounted. The project was expensive, the land was remote, and the foundation's patience was finite. By the end of her second week, Claire could no longer avoid it. Her presence was a line item in a spreadsheet, her progress measured in updates and deliverables. She sat on a log near her camp one cold morning, staring at her laptop screen as a chill breeze lifted loose pages from her journal. The emails piled up, each more insistent than the last. Claire, we need another status report. Are you tracking the new elk herd or not? GPS logs show you're stationary again. What's happening with the cameras? Donors want to see evidence we're making a difference. Photos? Anything. Please respond. Claire's chest tightened. She remembered the foal's luminous eyes, the impossible healing, the way the hollow seemed to operate on its own gentle rules. She thought of the risk. A single careless word, a single photograph released, and the world would come running, trampling this fragile piece under the boots of curiosity and greed. She took a deep breath, shut her laptop, and walked to the very edge of the hollow. The mare and foal grazed peacefully, unaware of the conflict raging inside her. A raven called overhead, its voice harsh and ancient, echoing off the distant pines. She made her decision. That afternoon, Claire submitted a falsified report. She attached old photos from the early days of her survey: blurry elk in the brush, an indistinct coyote trotting through the snow, a night vision shot of a deer at a salt lick. She marked her GPS log with random coordinates miles away from the hollow. Her notes were vague, professional, and bland. No unusual activity observed. Mammals and birds behaving within expected parameters. No sign of cougar predation. Weather conditions stable. I recommend shifting focus to the Southern Valley for the next 2 weeks. She pressed send, her finger lingering on the mouse for a moment before she let go. It felt like crossing a threshold, betraying her training as a scientist, her obligations as a grantee, maybe even her old self. But it also felt, in a strange way, like the first honest thing she'd done in years. As the days went on, the foundation grew impatient. Funding updates slowed to a trickle. Her supervisor called twice. She let it go to voicemail both times. The messages were polite, but steely. "Claire, if there's nothing significant to report, we'll need to freeze the project and reallocate your resources. Please confirm your travel plans home." Thank you. The weight of it pressed down on her. She knew what was coming. Her funding cut, her access revoked, her name removed from the project roster. At night, she lay awake, listening to the soft nickering of the mare and the gentle rustle of the foal moving through the brush. She tried to imagine returning to her old life, presentations, conferences, the constant pursuit of the next grant. It all felt impossibly small. The morning her funding was officially frozen, a delivery drone, ironically the same technology that had shattered the Hollow's piece before, dropped a package at the edge of her camp. Inside was a final notice. "Silver Pine Conservancy regrets to inform you that your field project has been suspended, effective immediately. Please return all Foundation equipment to the Boise office within 7 business days." Claire sat with the letter in her lap, her hands trembling with a mix of anger, sadness, and, unexpectedly, relief. She had a choice now. She could leave, file her final reports, and bury the memory of what she had seen beneath layers of professionalism and scientific distance. Or she could stay. The question burned inside her. Was she out here to collect data, or to bear witness? Was she willing to walk away from the only miracle she'd ever truly known, just because the world didn't believe in miracles anymore? That evening, Claire made her decision. She packed up the Foundation's equipment, taping up the camera cases, organizing the GPS trackers, sealing everything with the same careful precision she'd always brought to her work. She attached the return shipping label, placed the box outside her tent for the drone to collect, and sat beside it as the sun set. She was no longer an employee, no longer a scientist on assignment. She was just Claire, alone in the Idaho wild, responsible to no one but herself and the animals she had come to love. For the first time, she felt a profound sense of clarity. The Hollow didn't need her data, her credentials, or her carefully worded reports. It needed her presence, her attention, her respect. The animals weren't specimens. They were neighbors, teachers, fellow travelers. What they had shown her was beyond measurement. An unquantifiable lesson in grace, trust, and the courage to protect without expectation of reward. That night, Claire sat by the edge of the clearing, watching the moonlight silver the foal's coat as it moved among the trees. The world was silent but alive, vibrating with a wild energy that hummed in her bones. She opened her journal and wrote, not for publication or peer review, but for herself. "They paid me to measure, not to understand. I was sent here to prove something, but what I found can't be proven, only protected. I won't betray them. I'll stay, even if it means I lose everything else." As the days passed, Claire learned to let go of the old markers of success. Her phone ran out of battery. The radio grew quiet. She watched, listened, and wrote, capturing the rhythm of the Hollow as faithfully as she could. She found ways to survive without the Foundation's support, fishing from the creek, foraging for wild greens, accepting the hospitality of the forest with gratitude and humility. She felt lighter, stripped of the burdens of expectation. She began to notice new things: the exact note of the owl's call at dusk, the changing pattern of the foal's spots as it grew, the subtle dance of wind through the grass. The Hollow became her home, her purpose, her sanctuary. And as she walked the silent paths each morning, greeting the animals who now accepted her presence as part of the wild, Claire understood that some sacrifices were worth making. Some things, once seen, could never be surrendered. She had become the Hollow's last guardian, not for a paycheck, not for fame, but because she knew, deep down, it was right. Claire's new rhythm in the Hollow was soon broken, not by her own choices, but by the world she had tried so hard to hold at bay. She felt it first as a subtle change in the air, the birds more restless, the animals more wary. The silver mare and her foal moved less openly, keeping to the deepest pockets of shadow as if sensing some distant danger. Claire's own peace was fractured by a steady, gnawing anxiety. But for days, she couldn't quite name the cause. It started, innocently enough, with a faint signal on her old satellite phone. She found the device under a pile of notes in her tent, blinking stubbornly, desperate to connect. Out of curiosity, and perhaps a sense of foreboding, she powered it on. Instantly, a storm of messages poured in, alerts, notifications, and a dozen links to a single, blurry photo that had exploded across social media overnight. The image, hastily captured by a young hiker, was grainy but unmistakable. In the blue light of dusk, a slender, dapple-gray foal shimmered at the edge of a clearing. The caption read, "Idaho's own unicorn? Spotted in Ghost Timberline? What is this glowing horse? #wilderness wonder, #believe it." Claire felt her stomach clench. The feeling was not pride, but dread. She knew what would come next. The world, once alerted to magic, never left it alone. By noon the following day, the forest was no longer her own. Photographers lugging telephoto lenses moved in packs, tripping over roots and snapping branches without a second thought. Social media influencers set up impromptu camps at the forest's edge, trading rumors and speculations for clicks and likes. Hunters drawn by tales of a miracle animal and the promise of a legendary trophy prowled the undergrowth, their eyes hungry for something rare and wild. The transformation was immediate and brutal. Trails that had once been silent and secret became highways of human noise. Claire watched, helpless and heartsick, as her sanctuary was trampled under the boots of curiosity and greed. She tried to warn people off, pleading with hikers to respect the land, arguing with influencers to stop broadcasting GPS coordinates, confronting hunters and thrill seekers, but her words were met with shrugs, laughter, and occasionally open hostility. "What are you hiding, lady? This is public land." "If it's real, it belongs to everyone." "Don't be selfish." "It's just a horse. Chill out." Some listened, but most did not. She watched, despairing, as an entire family posed for selfies in the hollow, the mother balancing her toddler on the very log where the mare had rested. A group of teenagers stomped through the grass, their music blaring from a portable speaker, scattering the deer and foxes. Drone after drone buzzed overhead, the incessant whine drowning out the bird song. Each night, Claire returned to her tent feeling emptier, more defeated. She wrote feverishly in her journal, the words tumbling out in a torrent of grief and fury. The hollow is no longer safe. The foal hides. The mare trembles. What have we done? Is there anything left to save? She barely slept, haunted by dreams of the foal running, pursued by hunters and flashing cameras, until it dissolved into mist. One evening, after the worst of the crowds had moved on, Claire crept back into the hollow at dusk. The place was unrecognizable. The grass was flattened, patches of earth gouged by boots and tires. Litter, candy wrappers, empty water bottles, scraps of tape, clung to the roots and branches. The scent of gasoline and sweat overpowered the clean, wild fragrance she had come to love. Most heartbreaking of all, the animals were gone. No foxes darted between shadows. No bobcats slinked along the perimeter. The owl's perch was empty. Only silence and ruin remained. But as the sun faded and the last golden rays slanted through the trees, Claire saw movement at the far edge of the clearing. Standing perfectly still, legs slender and strong, was the dapple-gray foal. Alone. The silver mare was nowhere in sight. Claire approached, heart pounding, every muscle aching with regret. The foal did not flee. Instead, it watched her with wide, luminous eyes, something like understanding or maybe accusation shining from their depths. She crouched, keeping her distance, speaking in the low, soothing voice she had learned from weeks of quiet observation. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her throat tight. "I couldn't protect you." The foal tilted its head, as if considering her words, then looked beyond her, to the empty space where the wild congregation had once stood. Claire felt tears prick her eyes, the grief more acute than she had expected. This hollow, once a sanctuary, had become a stage for chaos. She stayed until darkness closed in, hoping for a glimpse of the silver mare, a sign that the old peace might return. But only the foal remained, a solitary beacon in the gathering gloom. As she turned to leave, she looked back one last time. The foal was still watching, waiting, as if expecting something, an apology perhaps, or a promise that could never be kept. That night, Claire wandered through the devastated forest, searching for the other animals. She found hoofprints pressed into the soft earth, tufts of fur caught on brambles, the ghostly echo of a bobcat's yowl. But the creatures themselves were gone, driven deeper into the timberline, or vanished altogether. She collapsed by the creek. Exhausted, her notebook clutched to her chest. The world she had tried so hard to shield was changed, maybe forever. She stared up at the stars, their cold brilliance mocking her helplessness. What good was a witness if you couldn't protect what you'd seen? As dawn broke, Claire forced herself to her feet, her resolve hardening. The foal needed her. If there was anything left to save, she would try, no matter the cost. The hollow was wounded, but not yet lost. She would not abandon it. Not now. The forest felt bruised, haunted by footsteps that had no place among the pines. Claire barely slept. She moved like a ghost herself, retracing her route through the hollow, collecting bits of trash, smoothing trampled grass with trembling hands. She tried to restore some order, but the wound ran deeper than broken branches and muddy footprints. It was a wound in trust, in wildness itself, a kind of violation that couldn't simply be swept away. That night, clouds gathered over the timberline, blotting out the moon. Claire sat hunched beside her tent, listening to the wind rattle the trees. She missed the animals' nightly calls, the secret conversations that had once made the forest feel alive. Now the silence pressed down, heavy and unfamiliar. She wondered if the silver mare and her foal would ever return, or if the hollow's magic had fled for good. It was nearly midnight when the quiet shattered. A gunshot cracked through the darkness, a single, sharp report that echoed off the distant ridges. Claire's heart lurched. She was on her feet before her mind could catch up, sprinting through the dark with only a flashlight to guide her. Branches clawed at her arms. Her boots skidded in the mud. Each second stretched, dread winding tighter with every breath. She reached the hollow, panting, her flashlight beam slicing through shadows. The clearing looked empty at first, but then she caught the shimmer of the foal's coat, dull now, not glowing. It stood near the edge of the grove, legs splayed, staring at something on the ground. Claire's heart sank as she saw the silver mare collapsed in the grass, her flanks heaving with ragged breaths. The mare's hind leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, blood pooling beneath her. Claire dropped to her knees, searching for the source of the injury. Her fingers brushed against cold steel, a snare wire coiled tight around the mare's leg, its barbs slick with blood. The trap was meant for wolves, lethal, illegal, and indiscriminate. "Oh God, no, no, no," Claire whispered, fighting panic. She fumbled for her knife, trying to free the snare. The mare flinched but didn't fight her touch. She was too weak. Claire worked in silence, teeth clenched, hands slick and shaking. At last, the wire gave way. Blood flowed freely, too much, too fast. Claire pressed her scarf to the wound, desperate to stop the bleeding. The foal stood nearby, watching, unmoving, unafraid. There was a strange intensity in its gaze, something ancient and fathomless. Claire felt it, like the air itself was vibrating, charged with energy that prickled her skin. Then, as if responding to an unspoken signal, the foal stepped forward. It lowered its delicate head beside the mare, pressing its muzzle gently to the bleeding leg. Claire froze, unable to look away. The world seemed to slow, sounds falling away until there was nothing but the beating of her heart and the quiet breathing of the wild. Light shimmered along the foal's coat, not bright, not miraculous, but subtle. Like moonlight on water, the air around them grew warm, almost humming. Claire stared as the bleeding slowed, as if the flow of time itself had shifted, bending around this wounded life. It wasn't magic, not in the storybook sense. The skin didn't knit together instantly, the wound didn't vanish, but the blood loss slowed, the mare's breathing eased, and the terrible pain in her eyes softened. The foal stayed pressed to her side, patient and gentle, as if lending its strength. Claire blinked back tears, not understanding what she was seeing, but unable to deny it. It was something older, deeper than science, a truth so rare that words only cheapened it. She whispered, "You're saving her, aren't you?" The foal glanced at her, and for a moment Claire thought she saw understanding flicker there. Not human, but something shared, a recognition that crossed the boundary between wild and human. Minutes passed. Claire kept pressure on the wound, murmuring soft encouragement. The mare didn't move, but her pulse steadied. The foal finally lifted its head and nuzzled Claire's shoulder, startling her into a shaky laugh. She reached out, hesitantly, stroking the foal's mane. It felt warm, alive, more real than anything she'd ever touched. The crisis faded. The forest, sensing the shift, seemed to exhale. Claire sat back, exhaustion flooding her body. She had no words for what she'd witnessed, no way to record it, no proof except what she'd seen and felt. The urge to capture it on camera was gone, replaced by a reverence too deep for documentation. She remained beside the mare and foal through the rest of the night, refusing to leave them alone. When dawn crept across the sky, she saw that the bleeding had stopped. The wound, though still raw, looked clean. The mare was alert, her head lifted to meet Claire's eyes. There was gratitude there, or perhaps just the simple acknowledgement of another survivor. The foal pressed close to its mother, both of them standing in the golden light as if nothing had happened. But Claire knew better. The wire, bloody and broken, lay coiled in the grass, a reminder of the world's cruelty and the wild's fragile hope. For the next few days, Claire kept a silent vigil, tending the mare as best she could. She cleaned the wound with water from the creek, foraged for herbs she remembered from her grandmother's garden, yarrow, plantain, whatever she could find. The mare tolerated her presence, her trust tentative but growing. The foal stayed near, never wandering far from either of them. Wordlessly, Claire found herself part of the hollow's rhythm again. The other animals began to return, drawn by something in the air, or perhaps the absence of human chaos. She saw foxes slinking along the edge of the trees, a hawk perched above, even the bobcat reappearing in the shadows. There was a sense of restoration, not total, not perfect, but enough. At night, Claire sat by the clearing, watching the mare and foal move together, their silhouettes silvered by starlight. She wrote in her journal, "It's not magic, it's something deeper, something true, but misunderstood. The wild doesn't need explanation. It needs respect and someone willing to stay, even when it's hard." She read her words aloud, the sound carrying into the stillness. For the first time in days, she felt hope flicker in her chest. The hollow was wounded, but not lost. And she too was healing, slowly, imperfectly, with each sunrise. The world would never understand what she'd seen, but for Claire Vega, understanding was no longer the point. The gift was in the mystery, in the bond she shared with the wild, and in the promise to protect it, no matter what came next. Underscore, 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 underscore. The wound healed, but the tension in the hollow never truly eased. For days, Claire kept her vigil, hovering near the silver mare and the miraculous foal, listening for every new sound, every sign that the fragile peace might shatter again. The other animals moved carefully, still haunted by the memory of human chaos. Claire's world shrank to the dimensions of the hollow, her days a blend of cautious hope and growing dread. It was the phone, her old satellite phone, recharged for emergencies, that finally shattered the illusion of safety. A single message slipped through the failing signal. "Heads up, local wildlife officers coming your way. Saw a vlogger post a video last night. Looks official. Stay safe. Jay." Claire felt a chill coil in her stomach. The message was short, But its implications were enormous. All it had taken was one video, one wilderness vlogger, hungry for views, stumbling onto the hollow in the aftermath of the chaos. The world's attention, already buzzing at the edge, now had an official excuse to invade. She stuffed her journal, some medical supplies, and a few precious granola bars into her pack. She debated warning the animals, but she knew it was impossible. Instead, she walked into the clearing as the sun broke over the treetops, painting everything in gold. It started with the sound of engines. Not the careless, noisy growl of influencers or the soft tread of hikers, but the low, deliberate hum of government trucks. Tires crunched gravel, doors slammed, voices murmured, clipped and efficient. Claire's heart thudded. She recognized the uniforms as they emerged. State wildlife officers, 2 rangers from the Bureau of Land Management, and a trio of scientists from a local university, each armed not with rifles, but with tranquilizer guns, cages, and tablets. They didn't notice her at first. Their focus was on the grove, scanning with binoculars, whispering about the subject and containment protocols. One officer pointed to a map, tracing routes with a gloved finger. "We trank them, load them up, and get them to the lab by noon. The state wants answers, and this is our shot." Claire's body moved before her mind could catch up. She stepped out from the trees, voice steady but trembling at the edges. "You can't do this," she said, placing herself squarely between them and the hollow. "This isn't some animal you can tag and bag. You have no idea what you're interfering with." They turned as one, startled. The lead official, a woman with a sharp jaw and even sharper eyes, approached her. "Dr. Vega, isn't it? We know who you are. We also know what's at stake. You're a scientist. Surely you understand the importance of studying phenomena like this." Claire shook her head, fiercely protective. "If you need to know it to believe it, then you'll never understand it. Some things shouldn't be caged or tested. What you're chasing is more than an anomaly. It's a gift. And if you take it, you'll destroy it." The officials exchanged glances, the tension mounting. One of the scientists, a younger man, tried to appeal to her reason. "Think about what this could mean. Medical advances, new biological insights, maybe even a whole new branch of genetics. Don't you want to be a part of that?" "No," Claire replied, her voice growing firmer with every word. "I want it to remain free. I want the world to have wildness left in it, not just what we can control or understand. I've spent weeks watching what happens here. You'll ruin it in a single day." The standoff grew heavier. The lead ranger gestured to her team. "We have orders, Dr. Vega. If you won't help, please step aside." But Claire stood her ground, feeling the hollow's energy gather around her. Her heart pounded with fear. Real fear, not just for herself, but for the creatures who had trusted her, the miracle that had chosen her as its witness. A branch snapped behind her. She turned, expecting an animal, but found something entirely different. People. Locals. First just a few, then dozens. Tribal elders in beaded vests and woven hats. Old ranchers leaning on canes, park rangers in faded uniforms, families she recognized from the nearest town. Even Jay, the biologist who'd sent her the warning, emerged from the woods with a nod. They formed a silent circle behind Claire, spreading around the officials in a wordless, immovable ring. No one spoke. No one raised a fist. There were no protest signs, no angry slogans. Just a community, diverse, stubborn, and quietly united in their refusal to let the wild be tamed. One of the tribal elders, her braids streaked with silver, stepped forward and placed a hand on Claire's shoulder. She said nothing, but her eyes said everything. "We're with you. We remember what wildness means." The officials hesitated, sensing the shift. The lead official glanced at the growing crowd, her resolve flickering. The silence grew thick, unbreakable. In that hush, the hollow itself seemed to reclaim its power. A sanctuary built not on laws, but on shared belief. Claire met the official's gaze, holding it. "You're not welcome here. Not with cages, not with darts. Leave." It was not a threat. It was simply true. The lead ranger finally exhaled and gestured for her team to stand down. "Let's go," she said softly, defeated. This isn't worth the fight. The officers and scientists collected their gear, their faces a mix of frustration and reluctant respect. They walked back to their vehicles, engines rumbling, and soon the clearing was quiet again. Claire stood in the silence, every muscle trembling with adrenaline. She turned to the locals, gratitude swelling in her chest. No words were needed. Each person understood the gravity of what they had done. Together, they had drawn a line. A quiet, living boundary that no one would dare cross. The silver mare and her foal emerged from the brush, drawn by the calm. The foal paused beside Claire, its eyes bright and unafraid, then trotted into the open, its coat shimmering as if the sun itself had blessed it. The elders watched, smiling. The children gasped. Even the toughest ranchers blinked back tears. In that moment, Claire realized the hollow was not just a place, but a promise, a testament to what could endure if enough people chose to protect rather than possess. That night, as the stars gathered above, Claire sat with the mare and foal, surrounded by friends and strangers who had become her family. There were no more officials, no more cameras, just the wild, as it was always meant to be, free, untamed, and fiercely defended by those who understood its value. Claire wrote in her journal, her hands steady and her heart full. Today, we stood for something that couldn't speak for itself. We drew a line. And the world, at least this corner of it, chose wildness over control. Maybe that's enough. The forest felt lighter in the aftermath of the standoff, as if the land itself breathed a sigh of relief. The officials were gone. The influencers and hunters had drifted away, frustrated by the lack of spectacle, their attention pulled by newer stories online. Even the trash left behind was slowly being gathered up by local volunteers, who came in shifts to help restore the hollow to what it had been. A quiet haven, touched by wonder and loss in equal measure. Claire moved among them, helping where she could, but her mind remained half distant, drawn back to the silver mare and her dappled foal. Each morning she woke at dawn, expecting, almost desperately hoping, to find them still there, grazing in the misty clearing or resting beneath the old pines. And each morning they were. The mare, her limp all but gone, moved with renewed grace. The foal, stronger and taller now, would sometimes venture to the edge of the hollow to watch Claire work, curiosity flickering in its ancient knowing eyes. The local children called the foal Moonshadow, a name that somehow fit. The elders called it Gift. Jay and a few other biologists, now content to observe from afar, simply called it the Miracle. For Claire, it became something more personal, an emblem of what she'd fought for, and perhaps what she'd lost. But peace in the wild is always fragile. Claire knew it better than anyone. There were mornings when she found herself searching the hollow for signs, hoof prints in the damp earth, the faint imprint of a body in the grass, her heart in her throat each time. She realized she had begun to measure time not in hours or days, but in the presence of the mare and foal, each moment with them precious because she could not count on another. It was late spring when the first change came. She woke to a silence sharper than usual, the air cool and still, every sound hushed as if waiting for something to end. Claire rose from her bedroll and made her way to the hollow, finding the animals gathered as they had once been, foxes and deer, the bobcat in the shadows, even the owl, silent and regal on a high branch. The silver mare and the foal stood at the heart of the clearing, moonlight washing their coats in silver and pearl. She watched from the tree line, holding her breath, sensing something different in the air. The foal seemed almost to glow from within, its movements graceful but otherworldly, as if it was no longer bound by the same laws as the rest of them. The mare nuzzled its flank, and for a moment time itself seemed to pause, one perfect tableau suspended between past and future. When the wind shifted, Claire blinked and the foal looked up, catching her gaze. There was a message there, not of goodbye, but of understanding, of gratitude. The foal took a step toward her, then turned back to the mare. Together, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, they slipped into the shadows at the far edge of the grove. Claire followed as far as she dared, but when she reached the spot where they'd disappeared, There were no hoofprints, no crushed grass, not even a lingering scent. The air was utterly still, the hollow empty. Only the faintest warmth remained, as if the ground itself remembered their passage. She fell to her knees, not in grief, but in awe. There were no tears, only a bittersweet ache and a deep, resounding peace. She realized in that moment that the mare and foal had left not because they were driven away, but because they had chosen their own fate. They had remained as long as they needed, as long as the wild had allowed. Now they had slipped away on their own terms, untamed, unclaimed, forever beyond the reach of those who would study or own them. Claire stayed in the hollow for hours, letting the silence fill her. The other animals melted away, vanishing as quietly as they had come. Even the owl took flight, a ghost among the branches, until she was alone beneath the vast Idaho sky. When she finally rose, Claire found herself smiling, not from joy, but from acceptance. A sense of closure she had not expected. The hollow was empty, yes, but not desolate. The memory of the miracle lingered in the gentle way the wind rustled the grass, in the slow, trusting return of the other creatures, in the quiet pulse of wildness that could never truly be lost. She gathered her things and wandered the hollow one last time, touching the old log where the mare had rested, kneeling beside the creek where the foal had played. She found no physical traces, no hair, no hoofprints, nothing to prove what had happened here. Only her memories, vivid as sunlight, and her journals, filled with words that could never capture the truth in its entirety. As the sun set, painting the timberline in rose and gold, Claire understood. The gift was not in possessing the wild, but in being permitted to witness it. The animals had not been tamed, and the hollow had not been conquered. Instead, they had shared their world with her. For a season, a miracle, and then gently slipped away. That evening, as she built a small fire and shared bread with Jay and a few of the other locals, she found herself at peace. No one spoke of the disappearance. Somehow, everyone seemed to know. It was the way of things, a story as old as the land itself. The next morning, Claire visited the hollow one last time. She stood at its center, breathing in the cool, sweet air, and whispered her thanks to the mare, to the foal, to the wildness that had allowed her to belong. She did not feel abandoned. She felt chosen. She walked out of the forest with her head held high, a part of her forever changed. Behind her, the hollow was still. The world would never know the whole story, but she did, and that, she realized, was enough. The hollow was quiet, but the world beyond it was not. Word of the disappearing miracle filtered back into the news cycle, spinning through online forums, blogs, and the endless scroll of social media. The grainy hiker photo and a handful of out-of-focus vlogger clips became digital folklore, endlessly analyzed and embellished, turning Moonshadow and the Silver Mare into myths almost overnight. Claire Vega watched this from a distance, her name suddenly back on the radar of wildlife circles and conservation groups. Journalists called, emails stacked up, urgent and insistent, requests for interviews, speaking engagements, even offers for documentary deals. Her former foundation tried to reclaim her narrative, offering a way back in a path to reputation and respectability. The invitations culminated in a formal request from the Global Conservation Forum. Would Dr. Vega present her extraordinary findings on the main stage in London, with travel and honorarium provided? Claire read the invitation 3 times, then closed her laptop and set it aside. Her journal, heavy with months of private notes, sat on the table beside her, a silent testament to everything she'd lived and lost. She remembered the hush of the hollow at sunrise, the delicate brush of the foal's muzzle against her hand, the mare's dark, trusting eyes. None of those moments could be captured by headlines or on a screen. The truth of what had happened in Ghost Timberline belonged to the wild, not to the world. She felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow as she drafted her reply. Thank you for your invitation. I must respectfully decline. There is nothing I can say on your stage that would honor what I witnessed. Some miracles do not belong to us, and some truths cannot be proven only remembered. Instead of speeches or fame, Claire posted a single essay on a small, nearly forgotten blog, a place she'd once used to share field notes with a handful of close colleagues and students. She called her piece, "The Hollow That Taught Me Nothing I Could Prove." Her words flowed easily, each sentence anchored in humility and gratitude. There are places on this earth that do not wish to be found. There are stories that exist only in the space between silence and wonder. Stories that change us, not because they are explained, but because they remain mysterious. What I saw in Ghost Timberline cannot be dissected or mapped, not truly. Wildness is not the opposite of order. It is the presence of a code we never asked to understand. She described the gathering of predator and prey, the impossible peace, the wound in its healing, and the final, gentle vanishing. She did not mention names or GPS coordinates or anything that could guide strangers back to the hollow. Her purpose was not to convince or impress, but to witness. To speak quietly, in a world addicted to noise. At the end of her essay, she wrote, "If you seek proof, you will never be satisfied here. What I found in the hollow was not data, but a lesson. That the value of a thing does not come from our understanding or possession of it. Some truths are wild, uncatchable, and sacred. I hope, if you ever find such a place, you will choose to listen instead of extract, to remember instead of reveal." She posted it with no fanfare, half expecting it to be lost in the tide of the internet. But over the next weeks, something quiet but persistent happened. The essay was shared, first among conservationists and field biologists, then among teachers, writers, and people who had never set foot in Idaho but knew what it meant to yearn for the wild. Comments trickled in, words of gratitude, stories of private miracles, confessions of lessons learned too late. Her inbox filled not with interview requests, but with messages from strangers who understood that reverence, not revelation, was the highest form of respect. Claire turned down every subsequent invitation. She was done with the spotlight. Instead, she found herself drawn back to teaching. A small class at the local community college, then guest lectures for young conservationists in nearby towns. She spoke of patience, humility, and presence, always leaving space for wonder. She never showed slides or video. Sometimes her students pressed for the real story about the hollow and the legendary horse, but Claire only smiled and told them about the value of sitting still, listening to the land, and letting the unknown stay unknown. It was during one of these guest lectures that a student, eager and sharp-eyed, challenged her. "But Dr. Vega, if you don't share the evidence, how will anyone ever believe you? Don't you want to prove you were right?" Claire paused, her mind returning to the moonlit clearing, to the soft silence that followed the foal's healing touch. "Sometimes," she answered quietly, "belief is not the goal. Some truths aren't meant to be proven. Some miracles happen only when we stop needing proof." The room fell silent, students shifting in their seats, absorbing a lesson more profound than any PowerPoint. Claire saw the curiosity in their eyes, but also the beginning of respect, the slow dawning of understanding that science and wonder were not enemies, but partners, each with its own place and value. She encouraged her students to spend time outdoors with no agenda, to write field notes without expectation of discovery, to cultivate an ethic of guardianship, not conquest. She told them what the hollow had taught her, that to protect something, you do not need to possess it, only to honor its existence and refuse to betray it. Her essay lingered in the digital wild, quietly shaping a different kind of conservation ethic, one that prioritized humility, restraint, and reverence for the unknown. Friends and colleagues in the field wrote to her, sharing their own moments of wonder, admitting that the greatest lessons often came when they put away their cameras and simply listened. Through it all, Claire kept the memory of the hollow alive, not as a story to be retold, but as a code to be lived. She taught her students to ask questions, but also to sit with uncertainty, to recognize that wildness is not just what we cannot control, but what we choose to respect, even in the absence of understanding. In the quiet that followed, Claire Vega knew she had finally found her purpose, not as a famous scientist, but as a humble witness. The wild had changed her, and through her might quietly change the world. Spring settled gently into the Idaho timberline. The forest's wounds, scars left by careless boots and eager eyes, had begun to heal, just as the silver mare's leg once had, not instantly, but patiently, with the passing of days and the grace of silence. For Claire Vega, life found a new rhythm. The hollow was quieter now, but not empty. Its magic lingered in the hush between bird calls and the way wild things moved through morning fog. And in Claire, something fundamental had shifted. Her purpose, her sense of duty, her understanding of what it truly meant to protect. She spent her mornings on campus, teaching future ecologists and conservationists. The lecture hall was modest, its windows thrown open to let in pine-scented air, and the class was smaller than any conference she'd ever attended. Claire liked it that way. Here, there were no projectors humming, no expectation of spectacle, only eager faces and curious minds searching for lessons she was finally ready to share. She began her last class of the semester the way she always did, with a question. What would you stand between, not for a paycheck, not for fame, but because you knew it was right? A silence followed, thoughtful and unforced. The students, some with hiking boots, others in well-worn sneakers, looked at her, waiting for a story. But Claire offered something subtler, something closer to what she'd learned in the hollow, a moment of quiet, an invitation to reflect. She didn't talk about the foal or the silver mare directly, though her words drew from those days. There are truths out here, she told them, gesturing to the green world beyond the window, that you won't find in textbooks. Some things defy capture. By cameras, by science, even by language. The wild isn't just a place. It's a question we're never meant to fully answer. A student in the back, a young woman who reminded Claire of herself at 20, raised her hand. But if we don't understand it, how do we protect it? Claire smiled, letting the question linger. We protect what we love, even when we don't understand, sometimes, especially then. Some miracles only happen when we stop needing proof. She told them about the limits of data, about the failures and dead ends of fieldwork, about the strange joy of witnessing without possessing. She described the moment she chose not to record, the night she watched healing that science could not explain, and the day she realized that the greatest act of guardianship was simply not to betray what she'd found. The students listened, some skeptical, some moved. Claire could see herself in their doubt and their hope. She encouraged them to ask questions, but also to practice humility. Wildness, she said, isn't the opposite of order. It's a different kind of order, one that asks us to listen, to respect, and sometimes to leave things unexplained. She ended the class with her favorite quote, one that had come to her in the hollow and now guided her every day. What we protect doesn't need to be understood. It only needs us not to betray it. After class, a few students lingered, hungry for more. One asked, "Do you regret not proving what you saw?" Claire shook her head. "No. I think if I'd tried to prove it, I would have lost it. And the world would have lost something even rarer. A place where the wild was still wild, because someone chose not to turn it into a spectacle." Another asked, "What would you do if you found something like that again?" Claire thought of the foal's eyes, the way the mare had trusted her at the last, the silent circle of locals standing in the forest. No signs, no shouts, just presence. I'd do what I did before. I'd listen. I'd stand between if I had to, and I'd let it be. Not for a paycheck, not for recognition, just because it was right. That night, Claire walked the old path back toward the hollow, the twilight soft on her skin. She paused at the edge of the clearing, listening for hoofbeats she knew she wouldn't hear. The wild had given her a gift, an invitation to be changed, to be less certain, to stand as a quiet guardian, even when the world demanded answers. She thought of her essay, still circulating quietly online, inspiring letters and confessions from strangers across the world. She read their words, the stories of quiet miracles, of moments when people chose reverence over revelation, humility over pride. Each letter was a small victory, a sign that maybe, just maybe, the world was ready for a different kind of stewardship. Claire kept her journals safe, but rarely opened them now. The most important lessons she carried inside. A memory of moonlight on silver coats, the hush of predator and prey at peace, the ache of loss mingled with gratitude. She knew that one day, someone else might stumble into a hollow like hers. She hoped they, too, would choose to witness instead of possess, to protect without explanation, to love without needing to own. Sometimes, on long hikes, she would see signs that made her pause. A single silver hair snagged on a branch, a set of tracks that vanished where the mist touched the ground. She never followed. She only smiled, whispered her thanks, and walked on. As summer blossomed, Claire's students spread out into the world, some to labs and national parks, others to small preserves and backcountry trails. She hoped they carried with them the core truth she'd tried to impart. That not knowing is not a failure, but a gift. That the wild is sacred precisely because it resists capture. That sometimes, to stand between is the only thing that matters. On her last walk through the hollow, Claire knelt in the soft grass, closed her eyes, and listened. Not for a miracle, but for the steady, quiet heartbeat of a world still holding its secrets. She smiled, knowing she had done what she could, and that was enough. And so, the hollow remained. Untamed, unclaimed, alive. Underscore, 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 underscore. If you finished this story and it resonated with you, please like and follow the channel. May you always find wildness worth protecting and the courage to let it be.